Welcome to We Got Balls, real, raw, masculine sex talk with Chris Inman and Scott Cohn. Chris and Scott both work with men who want to leave their unwanted sexual struggles in the past. They are willing to do whatever it takes to help men get curious about what drives their compulsive sexual behavior. With that said, here we go.
Welcome back to the We've Got Balls podcast. Scott, I've got a little story for you. You ready?
All right. Okay.
All right, here we go. A young man pulls up to his grandparents' house. He notices his granddad sitting on the porch in a rocking chair. And he's sitting there with nothing on below his waist. And he's just shocked. And he's like, "Grandpa, what the hell are you doing?" And the old man just kind of looks off in the distance. And he didn't really answer his grandson. He just kind of looks and says, "I'm doing my thing." And he says, "Grandpa, what are you doing sitting there with nothing on below your waist?" And the old man just kind of looks at him slyly and he says, "Well, last week I sat here with no shirt on and my neck got stiff. So this was your grandma's idea." I mean, think about it, man. That is what every man, there's a whole pharmaceutical industry around this idea of penises and erections. Why is this piece with impotence, with penises and the meaning that they give, the symbols that they are to us, why is it so significant in our culture and in our human experience?
Well, I think about what we ended up with, kind of coming to this conclusion in the last episode, which was really about penis size, right? And the research that was some really compelling research that we found about how men are dissatisfied with the size of their penis, or women are satisfied. Think about all the different aspects of meaning that are assigned to just the penis in general. So you have the size thing, and the belief around size is the bigger the man, the bigger the penis.
Right.
But it's not just about size. That penis has to get hard, right? Because a real man is hard. A real man can do hard things. And so think about the word impotence versus potency. Mm-hmm. When I'm potent, I'm powerful. That reminds me of a joke. So a guy was going to his physician because they'd had several kids and he was going to get a vasectomy. And so he hired a limousine to take him to the doctor and come back. And he comes back and his wife wasn't aware that he was hiring a limousine for this. And he gets out of the car and she goes, "What are you doing hiring a limousine to take you to a vasectomy and back?" He goes, "Well, if I'm going to be impotent, I might as well look it."
That's it.
So potency is important. Like that penis has to not only be big, it has to get hard. And it probably has to stay hard a long time, right? Because a real man knows how to use his penis to please his woman for a long time. So, but yet, what are all the common struggles that men have? We have struggles around erectile dysfunction. We have struggles with premature ejaculation, or we have struggles with anorgasm, not being able to have an orgasm. And a lot of those things are a part of kind of the current cultural milieu, over watching a lot of porn, feeling a lot of guilt about it, or even just the stress of our really busy lives. And yet all of that creates a lot of shame.
Yeah. And I think even deeper than that, in the piece around the symbolism of potence and impotence, is this aspect of, shame is rooted in the belief that there's something wrong with me. And if that part of my body is not working, then that's proof that there's something wrong with me. It's proof. And so, and even something as innocuous as, when you're young and you're having wet dreams, right? there's a shame factor to that unless it's brought into a context of, hey, this is part of being a human being. When you have an erection and you haven't ejaculated in a long time at night, sometimes you have a ejaculation in the middle of the night. And so there's this tie in my experience between what my penis is and what it does and what it defines me as a man and how powerful I am. That there is something created in us to tie those things together.
Well, that just makes me curious about your particular stories around growing up. Like, how did you experience information from your dad or cultural information from other sources about your penis, how you were developing as a boy into a man? What was your experience with that like?
Well, guess what? I grew up with mostly silence. I got one book and one talk. I got a book called Almost 12, which was like a cartoon book around sexual development when I was about 11 or 12 years old. My mom gave me that. My dad had a sex talk with me when I was in the car coming back from my grandparents' house when I was in middle school. And that was the extent of my sexual education from my parents. Everything else came from the lunchroom table at middle school, came from my exposure to porn, came from locker room talk, came from dirty joking. So my connection to sexuality and especially my own body was very, very limited simply because there was a whole lot of silence around it. And I think in that silence is baked in this idea of shame, that I'm looking to find significance in an area that I don't understand at all.
Yeah. So do you feel like it's common that in areas of our lives, particularly around areas of our body where we feel a lot of shame, we look for ways to overcome that in some kind of psychological way?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that I tried to overcome it was, when I started using porn compulsively, is I felt a lot more comfortable with my body when I was using it for lack of a better term, as a playground. I was still ashamed of it, but I was a lot more in sync with it. And that obviously ended in all kind of catastrophic ways in relationships and in my own pursuits in life, my spiritual and emotional pursuits in life.
Your approach in your family was one of kind of silence, which communicates a message, right, about this area of our body. So we don't talk about this, and we don't talk about it because it's not a good part of our body.
Yeah, it's the snake in the room, proverbially.
And that is. Do you think it's more common that families don't talk about our bodies, particularly our penises, as boys? They just don't talk about it, or do you think it's more common that families talk about it in a way that creates a lot of shame? So it's talked about, but it's always from a pathological, like that's a dirty part of your body, or it's called funny names. That's your wee wee. We don't want to call it the real name because penis sounds weird. Or is that more common? Or do you think it's common where kids grow up and they have really healthy conversations as they're growing about, oh, that's your penis. And yeah, when that gets hard, that's called an erection. And that's really normal. That's how God made your body to function. What do you think is more common in your experience?
Absolutely the former. I mean, absolutely the silence is there. And I think it's because at least, well, I'll speak from my own story. Nobody was willing to come out and say, this matters. Talking about your penis, talking about sexuality, talking about human growth and development matters. Because in the environment that I grew up, it was all intellectualized and de-emotionalized about doing the right thing. And of course, the only right thing that was accepted for me in my upbringing was doing nothing with my penis until I said I do on my wedding day and then having sex with my wife. That was the only appropriate use for my penis.
So that kind of tight control is an effort to kind of lock down desire, right? Until
100%.
the societally or the culturally approved moment, but it doesn't really help you deal with the desire that's at the base of all this, does it?
No. And that's why I had this duplicitous life where, on the one hand, I was the virginous groom who'd never had sex with anyone before he got married. And on the other hand, I was acting out with porn ritualistically. I mean, not even close to being every so often. It was daily, if not every other day. And that was back in the days where that was before high speed internet, when you had to do some work to go find out what you wanted to use to stimulate you. And so, for me, what I was really looking for was I was really looking for my masculinity. I was really looking for the energy, the power in my life that would make it meaningful. And I hid the reality of that search behind my religious exterior. And that was part of the duplicity. That's part of why we're sitting here right now, is because I lived in that place of duplicity for decades, and then finally had to make sense of that. So, but I know your story is a little different, Scott. I mean, you've found meaning, and significance in your own story around this topic in a different way, because not only was it for you a struggle with sexuality and finding significance and finding strength in that, but also it was about finding identity.
Well, yeah. So it's interesting because until I started working on kind of my story and my journey with both my body and sexuality and masculinity, I hadn't really thought much about um, how my views of all of that got shaped and formed in my family. And when I started working on it, this memory of an event that occurred over and over again when I was growing up, kind of presented itself to me, which was I was at my grandma and grandpa's house. I was about 1 year of age, and they had taken a picture of me standing naked on the couch. And the way the light was showing in the photo made me look like I was this really well endowed baby. And they would show this photo for family reunions and Christmas time and everything. When we got together, there would be slideshows. This was in the day of the carousel slideshow. And I remember sitting there with my aunts and uncles and grandparents, and everybody would laugh and, make jokes about the well-hung baby. And I was really confused because I didn't know if this was something I was supposed to be proud of or something I was supposed to be ashamed of. So there's a lot of confusion with that. And I'm not saying that my grandmother meant to harm me, but my grandma has her own story I'm discovering around this. And she was a very kind of earthy farm wife. And I remember oftentimes sitting around the dinner table on her farm, and they raised cattle, and she would talk about the size of the balls on the bull.
Wow.
And so there was almost a sense in which male genitals were held this incredibly elevated status in my family. And that was applied to me. So I was basically feeling like I was one of the farm animals, right?
Wow.
And being objectified like that. How does that then show up later in my life? Well, it shows up in the fact that, when I start showering with guys in middle school and high school and see where I compare with other guys, it becomes kind of a status symbol for me. And later on, the temptation to actually use that part of my body to get attention and affection became a really compelling way to get a jolt of that when I feel bad about myself. So in my family, I almost had the exact extreme opposite situation where not only was my penis talked about, it was talked about in a way that made me feel like an object.
Wow.
And so here we got in both of our stories two extremes. In one side, we're not even talking about it. We don't talk about those things. Over here, we're talking about it in a really inappropriate way that makes you feel sexualized, objectified. Again, not that anybody in my family intended to cause me harm, but it lays the groundwork for then how I view myself, what's important about me as a man, and how I get attention around that. So, unfortunately, I think these two stories that we have are probably the bulk of what any man's story can be around his penis. It's either not honored. To honor means to speak well of. It's either not honored by not speaking well about it at all. And, and in so many of our religious communities, they try to shut down sexuality by using a lot of shame. And it's only sexuality in the body is only talked about in terms of pathological stuff. Like, this is bad. This can destroy you. It'll ruin your life. But you're never hearing a message about how good it is. And again, even the language that's used about as you're growing up, that's your penis, that's an erection, that's ejaculation, that's a wet. Like, these things should just roll off our tongues without any embarrassment. And you have to wonder, how much shame are our parents bringing into the equation in the way that they address these issues? Because they all have sexual stories as well. And so there's that side of it. And then there's what I would consider kind of that's maybe more of the religious side. And then there's the cultural side, which is like, well, it's all about the size of your genitals. It's all about your sexual performance. It's all about how many people you've had sex with. And there's no kind of middle ground, it seems, where sex is seen as this beautiful, powerful, amazing thing that actually is something that we want to protect, because we always protect what we treasure. And yet, in one side, it's vilified, and the other side, it's worshipped. Where's the middle ground?
I mean, I resonate with you really strongly in that, Scott. Thank you for sharing. I mean, that's not a story that you get. You usually keep those baby picture stories under wraps because you don't want to be talking. You don't want to talk about that junk. But I think you're hitting the nail on the head when you talk about there being the need for tension around this. Is when we talk about penises, I think we're talking about something far greater. When we're talking about sex, we're talking about something that's far greater. They're both symbols for a human experience that we're struggling to get to. And whether it's, skewed one side or the other, the truth so often lies in the tension. It lies in the middle between these two seemingly opposing ideas. And yet there's beauty there, like you said, in the middle. So I think we have to keep exploring this and seeing where is it in each of our stories, where is it, listener, in your story, where you have had these experiences or similar experiences, or maybe something a little different, but you resonate with what it's like to feel objectified or to feel unseen in your experience around the story of your penis and the story of your sexuality. So we want to keep exploring that and moving into that in times to come. So, Scott, always great to spend time with you. Look forward to next time, brother.
Thank you.
Take care, guys. We will talk to you soon on the We Got Balls podcast.
Don't forget to subscribe for more episodes. You can connect with Chris at pornfreemasculinity.com and with Scott at successfulmen.com.